Hello, everybody, and welcome to a card breakdown video. The goal of this series is to go deep onto why cards are good or bad, so it can help us evaluate cards in the future, rather than simply understanding what makes them good or bad in a specific format, though we will of course be looking at that as well. For this inaugural episode, I am going to be looking at Traveling Minister from Crimson Vow Draft. If you do enjoy this video and this video series idea, remember to hit that thumbs up button. Let me know in the comment section down below, including cards you'd like me to evaluate in the future, and also be sure to subscribe to the channel for more draft content. Without further ado, let's dive in. In this video, I will be first discussing what makes Traveling Minister good. Is it format specific, or would it be good in any format? And then finally, some key takeaways that we can use to evaluate cards in future formats. So first of all, what makes Traveling Minister good? It's 1 white mana for a 1/1 with the ability tap, target creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn, you gain 1 life, and activate only as a sorcery. It's also a human for some slight human synergies that are within Crimson Vow Draft. So the first reason why Traveling Minister is good, because it has a real impact on combat for only 1 mana. +1/+0 is kind of like having a small little equipment that you don't have to pay mana to equip. You just pay that initial 1 mana, and then you can just activate your Traveling Minister over and over, and eventually you'll be able to just push through your smaller creatures and get some extra damage in. And if you have an evasive creature, then that extra power comes in handy to help you race and things of that nature. So it really does impact combat, and it only costs 1 mana, so you can deploy it early on turn 1 when you often won't have anything else to do, and then it'll give you a nice benefit throughout the game. The second benefit that it has and why it's good is because of incidental life gain. It is kind of a important aspect of the card that it's gaining you a life every time you use it, and that's what turns it from like a good card into a great one, because all of a sudden you're winning races that you shouldn't be winning. You have some synergies that we'll get to later that you're able to use that are going to help you take over the game with just more powerful kind of combo aspects of the card. And then it just really helps you, especially if you're playing a mid-range deck against a more aggressive deck, to make sure you don't get run over. And then finally, it stays relevant throughout the game. That's something that doesn't always happen with a 1-drop, and it's not like the greatest thing to draw in the late game, but it does have an impact, and it can maybe help you push through a board stall. At the very least, the life gain every turn can help you like stabilize your life total. And overall, it's kind of a card that just is good throughout the game, even though it does cost 1 mana and you'd prefer to have it in your opening hand. The fact that it doesn't just fall off a cliff in the late game is really nice. Compare that to a card that was like a 1 mana 1/1 that whenever it hits the opponent gets a +1/+1 counter. That's the sort of card that would be great on turn 1 because it's oftentimes going to snowball out of control and take over the game. But in the late game, it's not particularly good because you top deck that and then your opponent has like any number of creatures and you're not able to attack through. So this is the sort of card that stays relevant versus one that would fall off. So is Traveling Minister format specific for being good? And the first thing about the format is that white is mostly aggressive. There are some formats where white is more defensive, and the fact that white is a more aggressive color means that Traveling Minister fits right in. If you were playing in a more defensive deck, you're not really looking for Traveling Minister, because while the life gain is nice, paying 1 mana to gain 1 life a turn is not really worth it. So you have to be getting benefit of the +1/+0, and because you can only use that at sorcery speed, you kind of need white to be an aggressive color for Traveling Minister to be great. And so that's one of the reasons why Traveling Minister can thrive in this format. Yes. Another thing is that there is life gain synergy, as we mentioned earlier. There are cards that reward you for gaining life. There are like a few cards at common, a few cards at uncommon, and having those in the format does make the incidental life gain on Traveling Minister that much better. So that's another format specific thing for Crimson Vow that makes Traveling Minister better than it otherwise would be. It does help with training sometimes. Training is the mechanic where whenever you attack with a creature with greater power than the training creature alongside the training creature, you put a counter on that creature, and Traveling Minister can make sure that your 2/2s can train your other 2/2s if you are using the Traveling Minister +1/+0 correctly. And then finally, there's not much pinging. There's not a ton of 1 damage stuff. There is Ballista Watcher in red that can deal 1 damage, and that does punish things like Traveling Minister, but that's really one of the only ways to punish 1 toughness creatures in this set. And so in some formats, there might be a red removal spell that does 1 to 2 separate creatures or things of that nature. But in this format, 1 toughness creatures are relatively safe, and therefore Traveling Minister gets to stick around unless your opponent is willing to use a real removal spell on it, which does make Traveling Minister better than it otherwise would be. So it's important when evaluating whether a card is only good in a specific format, not only to look at the things like that are in the format, like white is aggressive, there is life gain synergy, and there's training, but also what's not in the format, and not having 1 damage removal spells that are like able to kind of get extra value by killing 1 toughness creatures, like an effect that would deal 1 damage to multiple creatures, like Magic Missile from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms draft. Those sorts of cards that deal 1 damage and really punish 1 toughness creatures. The fact that those aren't super prevalent in this format is a factor in helping Traveling Minister really shine. So looking at this analysis, it kind of seems like Traveling Minister is especially well suited to Crimson Vow draft, mostly because of the aggression, the life gain synergy, and the fact that you can like help race if you are playing in an aggressive mirror or something like that. And the lack of pinging also helps as well. Though the card would probably be good in other formats, it might not be as great as it ends up being in Crimson Vow. Finally, what are some key takeaways to remember about the Traveling Minister and cards like it in the future? First of all, +1/+0 has a real impact on combat. It looks really small when you look at it. It's just a single power boost, but we've seen time and time again that it actually does perform quite well. So for example, Combat Professor from Strixhaven was a really powerful card that kind of introduced this +1/+0 temporarily boost. It was the first card that I remember seeing doing that. That wasn't really an equipment. So Combat Professor was really powerful in Strixhaven, and it kind of continued with the card Valor Singer from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. And this is another card that gives +1/+0 just for a combat phase. And now Traveling Minister does the same thing. And these cards are performing pretty well in their formats. And I think they're the sorts of things that you need to be aware of going forward, because it seems to be a mechanic they've liked printing recently, and it's actually performed quite well. So we'll have to keep that in mind. If we see a card that does that in the future, maybe we need to evaluate that a little bit higher. Another thing is that 1-drops are steadily improving. It used to be that 1-drops were really bad, but for the past couple of years, the 1-drops have started to become more and more playable, and a lot of them are pretty solid these days. So it's important to kind of get over that bias. If you are a long-time drafter, that's the sort of thing that can stick with you, where you just kind of immediately assume the 1-drops are bad. But being able to evaluate them properly and make sure that if there is a card that's as good as Traveling Minister or some of the other 1-drops from this set, like Lantern Bearer and things like that, that you can properly evaluate them. And then finally, life gain matters. It's easy to just see a card that gains you some life and be like, well, if I only had a card that gained me life, it wouldn't do anything. But the fact that this is tacked onto a card that already has a decent effect really does make a big impact. I think this card would be significantly worse if it didn't have the you gain 1 life, not only for the lack of synergies, but also because it really does help with races. It helps smooth out your life total, and it makes life a lot easier. So I think that making sure you remember that life gain does matter. It's almost like a 2-point life swing every time you use this card instead of a 1-point life swing, which is really a big difference. And so I think that that's a pretty nice thing to remember, is that life gain does matter. Lifelink can be a great mechanic. Cards that gain you a little bit of life when they enter play, it's important to factor that into your evaluations. Anyway, that is going to do it for this episode of card breakdown. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember to hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, comment with your questions, and also to let me know what cards you'd like me to break down in the future, and subscribe for more draft content. Click the bell icon if you would like to get notified when I post future videos. And then if you would like to support my content and help me make more videos in the future, be sure to check out the Patreon, patreon.com/NicolaiBolas. There's a host of cool rewards, and just a couple bucks a month really does help me make more videos. That's going to do it for this one, though. I hope you enjoyed it. If you made it all the way to the end, leave #1DropWeapon to let me know you made it all the way till the end. That's going to do it, though. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next time.